disasters, if you can say. Earthquakes are expected. Flash floods and droughts are normal. Water is in short supply, even air. Oxygen is in short supply. And one calamity that hits us every year regularly is our winters, which are minus 30, minus 40. And add to that a human invented disaster, which had become an annual phenomena, was the 10th grade examination in the schools. You're laughing, but listen to what the disaster was. Every year, regularly, consistently, 95% of all the students would fail in the 10th grade. In the whole region, only 5% would pass. And yet, the system, which was mainly came from Kashmir, because we were a part of Kashmir, would blame the children for being bad, for being mentally retarded almost. They would say in their own terms like, you children in Ladakh can't do maths and science, you have not enough oxygen in the air. So you can imagine what children can do. They can't fabricate oxygen, so they might as well give up. So that's what it was. And while teaching these children, initially to only help my own expenses in engineering, I saw that actually these children who were being branded as failures and discarded, rejected, were so enthusiastic, so very interested in learning. They did quite poorly in the school books, but they had many qualities that I'll come to. But in the school books, they would consistently get very poor marks. And I thought, you can't have a system where 95% of the products fail and you blame the product. Whether it's a software factory or a car factory, if 95% of your products come back, you better look into your system and overhaul it, right? So that's what I started doing, and I checked what was the problem. I found the curriculum so irrelevant, the language used so alien. In a place like Ladakh, where children speak Ladakhi, you had Urdu, which was the state language of Jammu and Kashmir, for 8 years, and then suddenly English, which is international. But there could be no three languages more different in the world, which children were put one after the other. And Ladakhi starts from left to right, it's from the Tibeto-Burman group. Urdu is Indo-Persian, starts from right to left, and then again in English. And then you were surprised, they failed. And then the curriculum was so irrelevant, I would see children shivering in a minus 20 classroom trying to memorize F-A-N fan, F-A-N fan. And they would sometimes, some crazy idiot would ask, but sir, what is this thing? And the sir would say, oh, it's a fan. What does it do? I have not seen one, but the teacher would scratch his head. And I am told it keeps you cool. And the children's eyes would pop out. Cool? Why does anybody want to be colder than we are? So that's how relevant what was in the books was. So I thought at that time, maybe it's all because we copy-paste everything from Kashmir. So that's why we get such irrelevant things. But later, working in the field of education, this experience motivated me to work in the field of education reform. So later I got to Kashmir and saw that it is. So what we got in Ladakh was a copy of London, copied by Kashmir, copied into Ladakh. A fourth copy that was illegible by that time. And that's funny, but it took me few years or maybe a decade of work in the education system to learn that it was not even relevant to London. It made equally no sense in London because you still teach the same things that you started 250 years ago at the time of Industrial Revolution, when production, consumption, conquering nature was our obsession. And today we are seeing the impacts of that when the planet has come to a brink of collapse, and you're fueling the same. It's like a train that has lost its brakes, has gone on a wrong track, and you're putting more fuel. Yeah? Rather than stopping it or maybe putting water, you're putting in more of the same fuel and expecting different results. Well, as Einstein said, if you put the same inputs, you won't get a different output. The same inputs that created the problem cannot solve the problem. So it was equally irrelevant for the West as it was for Ladakh. So that's when we started rewriting the textbooks, retraining the teachers, regrouping the parents to demand education that the place needs. And so kind, always thinking of others, as is the tradition in mountains. Without this kind of empathy, cooperation, we couldn't have even survived in the mountains. But these qualities were completely not regarded as anything. Skills of the hands. They were each farmers and could make their own food and their own clothes, their own houses. But those were not even in the accounting of their abilities. All that was cared for was your ability to do some maths and write some paragraphs in some alien language. So it was too much about the head alone. And that's when we said, while bringing reforms in the schools, I should have told you that after this experience with the students, teaching them, I going to bring reforms in this education system, because engineers there are many. What was holding so many engineers, teachers, farmers from flying was the system that was debilitating. So better improve that. And that's when, while my friends were going to Silicon Valley and Bangalore, I came back to Ladakh to bring changes in the education system. Of course, people laughed at me for attempting such a thing as changing the education system, but we did it quite systematically, looking at the textbooks. We changed the textbooks, teachers, we trained the teachers, and approach that would be more holistic than just maths and science and English and so on. So we said we would move away from this 3 R's concept, reading, writing, arithmetic, all to do with the head alone. We said we should also recognize the skills of the hands and kindness, empathy of the heart. Only then a person would be a whole that is good for this world. So that, therefore, while helping them do better in the exams, because the exams continue to be just about the things to do with your head, we said we should make them better than their last generation in skills of the hands and also kindness of the heart, which the parents, their grandparents have been exemplary to even survive in the mountains, as I said. You have to. So therefore, we started a special school for those who failed in this system. And today it's often known as the school where the admission criteria is failure in exams and not marks and grades. Yeah? So that started as a solution to this problem, which produced so much of waste or failures, so-called failures. They were perfectly fine. They had no problems at all. Sometimes I tell them that when you fail in a bad system, you might actually be good. Minus, minus, plus. So don't give up hope. And it was also from another observation that we created this alternative school, the Secmal Alternative School. We saw, by that time, looking around the world, I could see that elsewhere there were big schools, famous schools, and all that in the big cities in India and around the world, where students were very good at all the maths and science and so on, but in the field of skills, they were actually handicapped. They couldn't sew a piece of clothing that was given to them. They couldn't repair the house. They couldn't produce or cook the food. They could only do their maths and answer some ready-made answers. So they were handicapped. Worse than that, they were handicapped also. Because it was all about my grade, my position, I'll come first, and schools didn't teach this kindness and empathy for others. And nothing about how to be kind to other beings also. It was all about human beings, their prosperity, their progress, anthropocentric as we call it. Rest of the birds and bees and trees didn't matter. It's another thing that it came back to them in the end. So this system had a big flaw, we thought. On top of that, I was very shocked to learn from visitors to Ladakh from Paris, London, New York, Australia, who would keep telling me about their world. And one thing that would come again and again was teenager problems. Teenager rage, rebellion, depression, drugs, suicide. And I just didn't understand because I had seen none of that in Ladakh. So I thought, maybe this is something racial. Maybe we don't and they have something like this. Until some 10 years later, the city of Leh in Ladakh started seeing the same thing. And more of the description I had got. This made me think that it's not about race or place. It's perhaps about how we bring them up. Then I started linking dots and understood that human young ones, since times immemorial, when we have been on this planet, have always learned in action. Climb trees, it was all intensive, physically intensive, exhausting to learn that way the skills of the times. Even as settled farmers, they had a lot of work to do and physically draining. And nature, as it always does, through evolution, gifted human young ones with extra energy to cope up with this learning phase. So they would have extra energy to follow their grown-ups and climb the mountains, dive into the valleys, climb the trees, and so on. So through millions of years, our teenagers, our young ones, were filled with extra energy in those years. And suddenly we think we got very smart in the 1700s when Industrial Revolution came and we became very, very intelligent. We made factories of all kinds and factories for children also to go into, where they would sit for 8 hours listening to lectures all day. And nature has its own ways. The extra energy that it had gifted would come out. It would come out just like mice and rats keep growing their teeth. 52 millimeter, 28 millimeter per week, they say. And it has to chew on things to keep it at the right level. That's why you see mice and rats gnawing into your clothes, cupboards. They don't eat those. They have to keep it fit. So similarly, this energy that's not as visible as the teeth of the mice comes out. And when not given a good release, becomes your teenager rage, rebellion. And then when they are not a partner, when they are not given respect or responsibility, they become rebels. When they don't see hope, they become depressed. They commit suicide and all such things. So we said, this school that we'll create, we'll have the students do everything. We'll have them conceive the design. We'll have them build the school brick by brick. We'll have them run the school. And that's exactly what we did. They were moving rocks, designing a solar-heated school system that would use the chapters on heat from their physics classes that would use geometry, that would use geography to understand how the sun rises, sets in a latitude like theirs, at altitudes of this kind, and they applied all this to create a school that stays warm, more warm than Delhi in Ladakhi winters. The school I came this morning from was 22 inside, just with sun and nothing else. When outdoors it was -8 or 10. Yeah? Always warmer than Delhi, actually. All thanks to high school science. Nothing more. So you can apply these to make people's lives better, do it for yourself and take it out to others, which Gitanjali will share more about, which is about the university. But at the school we learned a lot about schooling, learning. So we said, engage them in many things, give them all the responsibility. Don't look at them as problems to be moved around little pieces, but them to do it themselves and have all the time for new things yourself, teachers, grown-ups. So this school was not only built by the students, but it's run like a little country by the students. A little country which has its own little government, little parliament, little elections and little election commissions that monitor the elections, and then they run it. They take care of the water facilities, the electricity, the solar heating, the guests, the planning of schedules, invitees and all such things. And grown-ups can think of other things. So you make partners of your students, give them respect, give them responsibility, and mind you, these were failures. These were rejected by schools. They become stars. They become stars so much so that one of them who had failed 5 times, of course in a school where the admission criteria is failure, this person would get a red carpet. No? The toppers would be on waiting list. So this person, suddenly there's a spark in him, he does things, he's interested in the campus newspaper. It has a newspaper, it's a little country. It has a radio, it has a TV, huh? So like a little real country. So became a journalist, and later his people wanted him to lead them in politics. Became the education minister of Ladakh at 27. Another who had failed 4 times had developed skills of communication and using media, filmmaking, and today has been winning awards all across continents as a documentary filmmaker. A woman who was taking charge of visitors to the campus became a all-women's travel company. And not only is a famous entrepreneur, but has the heart to help women in distress. Yesterday I was at her organization, the foundation's meeting to plan on how to educate young girls, about adolescence and so on. So the skills, the head, and the heart to do for others and not just for themselves. That's how even failures became stars, is what I was trying to say. So therefore, we need to do something different in today's schools. Actually, COVID pandemic showed us was something that I used to cry, of course, and try to tell IIT professors when they would tell me, this generation is hopeless. They come in class, nobody is interested, they're just chatting and disturbing the class. And I would say, I have more sympathy for the students. Because you're still doing the same thing that you used to do in 50s and 60s, while the students have better lectures than any of your professors on YouTube, on all these platforms. So why would they be interested in a shady, version of that? Why don't you do something different? And COVID helped actually when everything went online. So I believe future of schools should be, or is going to be, at least we are trying in Ladakh to set up a model where all this thing of the head, concepts, theory, could be outsourced to online. You get the best professors of the world. You don't have to depend on the 5 that you have. Yeah. You choose among 5 million and take the best to build your concepts on photosynthesis, thermodynamics, whatever. Schools should not be about that. Schools by that standard should be closed down because it's all aware. If they were to do only, they were to address only the head, that was being done better by all these platforms. Now schools have even bigger relevance. It's not that schools are irrelevant, because now the schools should become these active labs where what they learned through lectures are applied. Yeah. You can't address your skills of the hands on software and online platforms. So schools will be or should be for engagement with real world, collaboration with others, and to practice and develop empathy to solve problems of people, nature, and heal the planet. And therefore, I want to believe that in future, perhaps, we won't waste the time of the children in telling them what YouTube does much, much better. We'll actively, and we'll not stop them from doing that. We'll actively engage them in watching those things, give them lists, help them watch all the best lectures, but come to school to apply, to innovate, to find solutions to problems. That's where the schools should go. And also, as the children go to higher levels, it needs to change also. Our universities are no different. We have just the same copy-paste from cold deserts of Ladakh to hot deserts of Rajasthan to coastal Kerala, same curriculum. The melodies are different, how can the remedies be same? So that's what we are trying with the Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, this alternative university that we hope to tinker with and show, if possible, how young people in their 20s can actually change the world. Young people in their teens at this school that I talked about make the school completely self-sustaining. The school doesn't receive any funds, donations, because the students produce enough and generate enough wealth and value to fund the school. But at that teens, in the 20s, it's a crime to hold them in a classroom, to listen to lectures. Let them go out and change the world and learn through that. That's the story of Ayal, which I request Gitanjali to share with you. Thank you.